Amongst other things, the referee's job is to protect the fighter's well-being. But what constitutes a stoppage or a technical knockout? And what action says a fighter can no longer defend themselves? There are many criticisms in boxing history based on fights ending too early, and in the worst case, not stopping fast enough. After the judges draw a decision between Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury, some fans felt Fury was robbed.
The whole boxing knows Fury won. I like Wilder, but he did not win that fight. Fury got robbed. Lucky you even have your belt. Fury won. You know it, everyone does. He got robbed. Wilder don't deserve another shot. Bruh, he beat you though. You got kicked in the jaw, bruh. You won almost every round. Wilder knocked him out, yes, but that's not enough for a draw.
You've seen my fight breakdown, but in this series, I not only debunk the opinion of Fury being robbed, but I present a counter debate that in fact, Deontay Wilder was robbed. So we'll travel in boxing history to compare outcomes and maybe find a way of proving robbery.
Tyson today compared to Tyson that beat Klitschko?
The Tyson that beat Klitschko is dead and gone. He don't exist anymore. That was years ago. I don't live on the past. I only live for today and tomorrow. What happened yesterday is history. I live for today.
Tyson, when you beat Klitschko, you said that getting to the top of the mountain, there was kind of nothing. At that point in time, you felt like there was nothing left for you.
Yeah, that's why I retired.
In this episode, we travel to Hanover, Germany, to the Prassag Arena, now known as the TUI.
Star City J. Star City J. Star City J.
On March 8, 2003, rising star Wladimir Klitschko lost to Corrie in not only the Ring Magazine's upset of the year, but one of the biggest in boxing history. Or so it's told.
Of the very cautious Jameel McCline in his last fight, tonight takes on Sanders, who has fought only 3 rounds in the last 3 years. This could be brief, it could be explosive.
As a decent fighter, Sanders was perceived to have never reached his full potential, but he was known for packing a powerful left hand and would annihilate Wladimir Klitschko in 2 rounds to gain the lightly regarded WBO heavyweight title. But before we get to the details, let's revisit parts of the trail our current lineal status has traveled.
Just a little correction there for you. I am no challenger for no man. I am the lineal heavyweight champion of the world. That means I'm the best of the best, the elite champion. So this is 2 champions colliding. I'm challenging for nothing or nobody. This is equal rights champion versus champion. So rephrase and start again, please.
So you're saying that regardless of whatever happens November 28th?
Yeah. I'll have enough money. I'll have enough money to retire. And live off of egg and chips and hedgehog all day.
In professional boxing, the Lineal Championship of a weight class is a theoretical world championship title. There is no physical belt for this claim. It is a theory that is open to opinion. There is no single canonical list of lineal champions at any weight class because there is no agreed upon method of what to do when the current champion retires or moves to a different weight class.
Canonical.
Authorized, recognized, accepted. The lineal title was held initially by an undisputed champion and subsequently by a fighter who defeats the reigning champion in a match at that weight.
Initial.
Being of, relating to, or occurring at the beginning. So following the earliest recognized lineal champions, you need to be considered undisputed. This was much easier with fewer titles and less hands in the pot.
SinBstyle.com.
And also, since fighting at that time was illegal, recognition was opinionated at best. Lineal Championship vacancies are filled via a box-off between the leading contenders in the weight division. Impartial, independent ranking organizations are referred to in order to determine who the top contenders are. The absurd ratings and comical decisions of sanctioning bodies are ignored.
Impartial.
Not partial or biased. Fair. Just.
Independent.
Not subject to another's authority or jurisdiction. Autonomous. Free. There's no definitive process to recognize a new lineal champ, but it generally requires a fighter to become universally acclaimed as the best in that class. The concept of lineal is great in my opinion, but the problem is it's my opinion. My opinion is subject to be discredited and opposed, even if factually based. Without a clear, written understanding of how lineal can be lost and how it can be obtained, the lineal champion becomes a matter of opinion and circumstance. It can never truly follow the man who beat the man, as interruption by death, retiring, or moving to another weight class breaks the original purity of its intention. Lineal promotes one man, one champion, and this is difficult having multiple sanctioning bodies that operate separately. And even worse, fighters intentionally avoiding other fighters in their division. As time has passed, more belts have been created and some eventually become included in the notion of undisputed. It has changed over time and will continue to change in the future. After being broken, lineal is and will always be just a continued list of opinions and theory.
Not a fact.
For me, becoming undisputed in a weight class after a break in lineal is the only way to truly become the man. But being the man who beat the man is irrelevant when the man is no longer fighting. When the first lineal champion was crowned, bare-knuckle boxing was illegal. In fact, most matches weren't publicized and the location would change to avoid arrest or having the event shut down. For that and other issues such as white fighters refusing to fight black fighters shows the lack of true sportsmanship, as it was in other sports. That's history. The lineal champ, from start to end, is diluted. Who was considered the man became very subjective in this era and will always have an asterisk for me. But I have other videos that dive a lot deeper into this and my personal reasoning. Remember, this is my opinion based around fact.
It's all about fear and dread and control and anxiety, about black bodies, about black sexuality, about black power.
In sports, whites also feared black prowess, and for good reason.
Blacks had been dominant in the Kentucky Derby, I think winning something like 13 out of 15 Kentucky Derbies. Blacks also participated in baseball, and of course blacks were also involved in boxing and fought for championships at the lower weight divisions, but not at the heavyweight division.
You're in an atmosphere that's, on the one hand, with sports talking about fair play, but on the other hand, you have this incredibly racist environment in the United States where it's difficult for a black fighter to get a shot because so many white fighters are drawing the color line.
It starts in the 1890s with John L. Sullivan when he issues his open challenge to fight all comers, first come, first served, who are white.
Even so, the man who beat the man has been broken 7 times in the given history, and there was never an official agreement on who would determine the next champion. However, looking through the given history breaks, it's clear the Ring Magazine's annual rankings played the role of choosing the next successors, and there's no possible way they could be biased, right?
Break number 1. James Jeffries. Retired.
In the first break, James Jeffries retired, leaving the title vacant in 1905. Marvin Hart defeated Jack Root to become the new lineal champion, and James Jeffries was the referee. Hart would lose to Tommy Burns, and Burns would eventually lose to Jack Johnson.
So Johnson says, now I can get my shot. He follows Burns to England. He doesn't get it. He follows Burns to Australia. Burns has a couple matches and says, what the hell? Why not fight Johnson?
So, for $30,000, Tommy Burns agreed to take on Jack Johnson for the world heavyweight title.
Johnson comes out against Burns, and in the early rounds, it's clear that it's a mismatch. And Johnson starts to taunt Burns, playing with the racial symbolism of the day, saying, come on, hit me in the stomach, Tommy, hit me in the stomach. Thinking that blacks couldn't take punches in the stomach and Burns would pound away at his midsection and it wouldn't bother Johnson. And then Johnson slowly began to pick up the fight and inflict more physical damage. By the 12th, 13th round, Burns had pretty much had enough. He had been beaten fairly severely.
Before the police stopped the fight in the 14th round, they ordered the film cameras also stopped, lest there be a record of a black man knocking out a white man. But history had been made, and Jack Johnson now wore the crown that had once belonged to Jeffries, Corbett, and Sullivan. John L. Sullivan himself, guest reporting for the New York Times, was enraged by the outcome.
The Negro can't assume that title. I can't see where Johnson will be given a high position in the opinion of the general American public.
Boxing is known as the manly art or the sweet science, and blacks were not supposed to have the mental capacity to succeed at that kind of activity. Well, Jack Johnson proved them wrong.
The white press simply couldn't accept the fact that there was a black heavyweight champion, much less an uppity black heavyweight champion. And a writer as great as Jack London became famous for writing the line that Jim Jeffries had to come out of retirement and wipe that smile off Jack Johnson's face.
But even though the direct path of the man beating the man had originally been broken, James Jeffries would return 5 years later after losing over 100 pounds to challenge the new lineal champ, Jack Johnson, who would go on to fix where the original lineage had broken by defeating James Jeffries, the Great White Hope. At this time, there wasn't the same monetary gain in black fighters against other black fighters. So even though Jack Johnson fought Sam Langford prior to winning the lineal, other greats such as for Harry Wills didn't get the same opportunities.
The biggest race riot in this country after the Civil War was the rioting that occurred after Jack Johnson beat the Great White Hope. I mean, there were riots in New York, in Washington, Chicago, all across the country.
Unable to beat him in the ring, Johnson's enemies went after him with the letter of the law. His crime? Transporting women across state lines for immoral purposes.
And the Attorney General at the time said, no, that would be a perversion of the Mann Act. We won't use the Mann Act for that, to go after a single individual. And his representative in Chicago says, well, that's all we have. The Attorney General writes back and says, okay, if that's all we have, use it. Was he guilty? Of course he was guilty. He was a boxer who traveled around America. He traveled with women who weren't his wife. He traveled with prostitutes. Was he making money from them? Absolutely not. But on a very technical sense, he's guilty of a violation, as probably millions of other Americans were. The government didn't go after them. They went after Jack Johnson, and they got him.
Whatever your political preferences or personal views, it was long overdue, but great to have Jack Johnson fully pardoned for violating the Mann Act.
Jack Johnson was not treated fairly, and we have corrected that, and I'm very honored to have done it, Linda.
Thank you.
And thank you all very much. Thank you, Sly.
Break number 2. Gene Tunney, retired.
In the second break, Gene Tunney retired after a successful championship run from 1926 to 1928, including 2 wins over the former Lineal and first New York State Athletic Commission and National Boxing Association heavyweight champ, Jack Dempsey. The infamous long count occurred when the new rule establishing boxers to go to neutral corners after a knockdown took effect.
SinBstyle.com.
In the rematch, Tunney was knocked down by Dempsey for the first time in his career and given an extended time to recover before getting up. Tunney would go on to win a unanimous decision and retain his belt. But before the long count, there was a signed contracted fight between Harry Wills to fight Jack Dempsey that never happened, which may have altered history as we know it.
While Dempsey feasted on white challengers, Harry Wills rose to the top of the heavyweight division.
Harry Wills was the best black heavyweight during the time that Jack Dempsey was the heavyweight champion of the world. There was a certain feeling amongst people in boxing that Wills deserved a shot.
The New York State Athletic Commission thought so too and ruled that Dempsey had to fight Wills. The two signed a contract, but political pressure forced a second vote.
The New York State Athletic Commission, as then constituted of 3 men, voted 2-1 they would not allow that fight with a black man.
And so Dempsey broke the contract in favor of a bout against white fighter Gene Tunney and a $700,000 payday. Wills was the odd man out.
The Dempsey-Wills fight was one of those great fights that probably, even at the time, people on the inside knew would never happen. Rickard didn't think it would make money. Dempsey didn't really care.
What you probably didn't catch in that last clip was the name Tex Rickard, who amongst many things promoted a majority of the title fights in the past 2 decades. In the July 1987 issue of The Ring, Nigel Collins produced A Return of Sanity, the new ratings. In this article, he states Tex Rickard was responsible for the first annual rankings up until his death in 1929. The only other distinction made was by Dan Daniel in the November 1958 issue, Flasher first to devise the ring ratings. In this article, he stated the ratings originated in 1924 by editor and publisher Nat Fleischer and the well-known promoter Tex Rickard was asked to review. In either case, it's safe to say the continuation of the Lineal Championship was influenced by Tex Rickard. So after Gene Tunney retired on July 31st, 1928, we can begin to follow the ring's annual rankings to see how Max Schmeling would take on Jack Sharkey for the heavyweight titles in lineal status. In the fight, Jack Sharkey was winning after 3 rounds, but in the 4th round, Sharkey was disqualified for a low blow that sent Max Schmeling to the floor. Schmeling would become the first boxer to win the World Championship by foul.
Break number 3. Joe Lewis, retired.
In the 3rd lineal break, Joe Lewis retired on February 28, 1949. When he won the title, he became the first black heavyweight champion since Jack Johnson. Lewis was an excellent boxer, holding the belt for 12 years with 25 defenses. His image was the opposite of Jack Johnson. In fact, when he was rising as a boxer, he was instructed to be anti-Jack Johnson. Not taking pictures with white women and not bragging or taunting any of his opponents or showing much emotion was set to avoid him embarrassing black culture and not offending white opinion. He rose in stature by defeating German Max Schmeling in a rematch during the start of World War II.
Lewis was never more militant in training than when he was getting ready to face Max Schmeling for their 1938 rematch. With Adolf Hitler marching through Europe, Lewis had unwittingly become a national symbol of freedom and democracy. President Roosevelt even called Lewis to the White House.
He felt my muscles and said, these are the type of muscles we're going to need to beat Germany with.
You almost had the feeling that whoever won this fight would win World War II.
A crushing right explodes off Schmeling's jaw, and Max goes down
for the third time. It doesn't look like Schmilling's going to make it. It's all over.
It was like the end of the war. It was really a feeling that we've won. In Harlem, of course, it was all of the New Year's Eves of the 20th century rolled into one glorious night.
That fight made Joe Louis. It made him an instant legend.
That's when he transcended from being the heavyweight champion of the world to a true American hero. The irony, of course, was that he was representing freedom and democracy across the world when he couldn't live those freedoms or democracy.
But during World War II, Joe Louis would enlist with other champions, and all the titles were frozen.
The great fear by the 40s was that blacks would take over most of the championships.
But it wasn't long before black fighters were getting their opportunity to move up in the ranks and contend for titles. Joe Louis played a vital role in this movement, setting the stage for some of the greatest athletes.
With the end of World War II, America inched closer toward integration.
In the 40s, it's not quite so socially acceptable in many circles to be so virulently racist as you might have been back at the turn of the century.
Boxing corrected its sins a lot quicker than the Supreme Court, because after the war, they began to allow blacks to move up through the ranks and challenge.
In large measure, Joe Louis was responsible for America's new racial consciousness.
After Joe Louis initially retired, Ezra Charles came back from a brief retirement of his own to defeat Jersey Joe Walcott by unanimous decision on June 22, 1949. However, he wouldn't be considered undisputed until he beat Joe Louis, who came back out of retirement on September 27, 1950, for a brief stint. This was also the second time a break in lineage would be corrected when the retired champ lost to the current champ. For all Joe Louis did as a patriot for the United States, he became another victim of the vicious system of taxation, but he'll always be remembered as a hero in boxing.
Break number 4. Rocky Marciano, retired.
SinBstyle.com.
Break number 4 came when Rocky Marciano retired undefeated on April 27, 1956. He is listed as the only heavyweight world champion to do so. Upon his retirement, Floyd Patterson defeated Archie Moore by knockout on November 30th, 1956. At 21 years old, Patterson became the youngest world heavyweight champion and would remain until Mike Tyson. Archie Moore, at 39 years old, would have become the oldest fighter to win the World Heavyweight Championship had he been successful.
Break number 5. Cassius Clay, suspended boxing license.
Break number 5 came when Cassius Clay refused to enlist into the armed forces, which every state denied his boxing license. His conviction wouldn't be overturned until the early 70s.
SinBstyle.com.
You're still the greatest. Yes, sir. The greatest boxer that ever lived. I'm the first one that they had to take a title from in the history of all of the red, white, and blue American title. I'm the first one that they tried to make the world believe that wasn't the champion and never has been beaten.
I advise them all to get all the education and learn to read and learn to spell mainly. That's something most black people don't get too hip to, is reading and spelling. Something I can't do right now, and I advise them all to do that.
You're a poet and you're talking like that?
What?
You can read and spell.
Well, I know, but I mean, like, I got common sense, see? But I have people help me with my spelling.
You're serious?
Yeah, I'm serious.
I'm a bad speller, too.
Did you hear about that first Army test they gave me? I failed 2 of them. They said I was mentally unable until they heard I was a Muslim. Then I was smart, but before that, they didn't want me. And the reporter said, I thought you said that you were No, he said that, you mean you failed your mental test after it came out, 1 in Houston, then they tried me again in Louisville with psychiatrists. And you know, if I had 12 apples and 3/4 was taken and 1/5 got lost, how many was left? How do I know the answer to all that? And I had to answer all that. And I failed the test. You understand? The man said, you mean you failed the test? I said, I told you I was the greatest, not the smartest.
Now, did they do this because of you, do you think?
Well, I really don't know. It's hard to believe that such a powerful government and a country like America would change a whole system just to get one black man in the service.
You'd only have to say one thing in this country, and you could be back in boxing tomorrow.
Yes, but I don't know. I don't think I'd have to say that. Many reasons could probably get me back. Number one, first, my case would have to be throughout, draft case. If they don't do that, I'll probably have to do 4 or 5 years in prison. And then if I come out then, if I'm in shape, then I can consider it. But as of now, money means nothing to me, nor boxing, when it comes to the freedom of your people. So everything I'm doing, if it means hitchhike tomorrow, if it means be raggedy, if it means look for a job, I'll be happy because I can go to bed, my conscience is clear, and I didn't sell out or trade my people just because I could be rich in Hollywood with a yacht out here on my, that could be my yacht right there. Imagine it's valued at $200,000, but I wouldn't want that damn yacht if I couldn't go back over in the black neighborhood and protest a black woman being raped. The hell with the yacht, the hell with the championship. So I want the people to know this, you understand?
I have nothing else to gain. I beat the best German they had to offer, the best that Canada had to offer, England, the best that America had to offer, 2-time United States Golden Glove champion, AAU champion twice, Olympic gold medal winner, defended the title 9 times, predicted the rounds on my opponents, wrote poems in poetic fashion, how they would fall, and I cannot go no farther in sports. And first, another thing I like to say, I'm the only black man that black people can now say has a champion, like I would say Marciano, that's undefeated and retired.
This, of course, I mean, we've seen here demonstrated your particular hold on these people because of your fame, because of your name, because of everything. You have a tremendous hold on these people. We've seen it here. Does this strike you as being a great responsibility?
Well, I would say yes. I have a great responsibility to do all I can as an image to lead them into doing the right things. I would say I'm not a leader, but all I can do is do the best I can, hoping that they will follow after me. Like an example, I think that the smoking that they are trying to do at a young age. I just encourage this, and the drinking and the mistreatment of women, and the stealing and gang wars and fighting and killing one another, which is going on throughout the United States. And as long as I can obey the laws of the land, as long as it don't conflict with my religious beliefs, and live as clean as I can, hoping that some of them will be impressed by it and see the success that I have and try to follow me in that way.
Yeah, I'm just about broke. I'm not allowed to work here now in America. I'm not allowed to leave America. I'm not like Joe Lewis. I didn't fight 13 years. See, I was
29 fights and won them all.
Yeah, but I just only had 9 title fights. And out of those 9 big title fights, my cut was $2 million. My cut after everybody got
After everything? That was your cut, $2 million?
No, not after everything. This is before taxes.
Before taxes?
Yeah, after my manager was paid, after my opponent was paid, the peanut man, the popcorn man, and everybody, my cut was $2 million. And out of $2 million, the 10 white men, the black men in Louisville, they made a deal with the government behind my back. I knew nothing about it. Real quick, they made a deal with the government where they would give the government 90% of all my earnings before I got them. This was called the Joe Lewis law to keep me from being broke, they say. But 90% of my $2 million went to the American government. So that only left me 10% out of $2 million to live on. And out of that, I had to pay $150,000 to get rid of my first wife because she wasn't joining the faith. And then naturally, it cost me money to live. So the money's about gone. And not only me, I don't know why people are so confused over one Negro boxer getting low in funds or depleted in funds when America's broke. America's now canceling trips and things to save money. So if you know if big, powerful America can get broke, you know a little Negro boxer can get broke.
Well, that's true. You can. You've severed all connections now with your management group in Louisville.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the group that brought you on. Did you leave them in a friendly manner?
Oh, yeah. The contract ran out. They wanted to renew it, but they didn't want to give me the price for it, so we just had to find another manager.
This universe is big enough for 3 champions, but the world is not big enough for 3 champions. 2 of us must leave, and it's not going to be me. Joe Frazier, James Ellis, they got to have a showdown. And after I go to jail, if I go to jail, I'm going to stay in training. And when I come out, they got to whoop me.
In the fight for Lineal and Heavyweight Championship, Joe Frazier would land some monster shots in the 4th round. After being on the receiving end of a vicious left hook, Jimmy Ellis showed a lot of courage to make it back to his corner as the bell ended the 4th round. But after not being able to continue to the 5th round, Joe Frazier became the new heavyweight champ and lineal carrier.
Break number 6. Muhammad Ali. Retired.
Break number 6 came when Muhammad Ali retired on June 27, 1979.
Ali's boxing skills have clearly eroded, but his presence as a global figure is still unequaled. So Ali retires and becomes a global ambassador for his causes, peace, goodwill, and the Nation of Islam. Everyone, from world leaders to barefoot children, smiles at the mention of his name and beams at the opportunity to meet him.
A few days after defeat, can you believe all of this? A few days after so-called defeat, they don't recognize that. All of these people, look at these people. This is a blessing from Almighty God. These are my fans, my people, because I put God first. The book says, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, then all things shall come to you. Ain't this living proof? People running for miles. People running for miles just to see and meet the champion.
But the ring still lures him, and in 1980, Ali announces that he is coming back. Again, he wants to fight for the title, currently held by Larry Holmes.
I shall return. I will regain it on the 3rd.
What is it that motivates a retired champion to come back?
To be champion again. That's what motivates you, to be champion. And once you've been there, it's something to be sitting in that thing, you know? And then that's what motivates you, to be champion again. And I think that's what Ali's thinking about.
In one of the toughest fights for me to watch, Larry Holmes defeated Muhammad Ali on October 2nd, 1980, when the fight was stopped going into the 11th round.
Wants to stop the fight. That's it. They stopped the fight at TKO. It'll be scored as a technical knockout.
All of my fans,
You gotta recognize him. We gotta be honest. He won clean and square and fair. And I'll just say, give him your support from here on until I return.
Right on. Muhammad Ali and Larry Holmes, y'all. Two great champions.
This man who helped me grow, this man helped me in his camp, gave me the opportunity to learn and to be with him, to see what a champion is really all about. More important than all of being a champion, giving me a chance to see what a great human being he really is. And I love the man and don't care what nobody say about it, and I respect him one hell of a lot.
Why'd you whoop me like that?
After the fight, Ali checked into the UCLA Medical Center where he was given a thorough examination, and here's Don Oliver with the story.
Ali said he checked into the hospital because he hadn't felt well before last week's fight, and he wanted to know what was wrong.
I wasn't myself the night of Holmes. I couldn't get away from punches. My timing was off. My reflexes were slow. And I was weak and tired after the first round.
Ultimately, it is determined that Ali suffers from Parkinson's syndrome, probably caused from receiving so many blows to the head in the ring. His speech is slurred and his movements are slower, but his spirit remains strong.
Another reminder how brutal of a sport boxing is, and the price it can take to become the greatest.
Ali's story reads like a biblical tale of a prophet who came from humble beginnings and went on to unite the world by becoming the most famous man in it. His life is a tribute to all of us, to the possibility inherent in humanity, to the importance of standing for something, fighting for your beliefs, and to the triumph of courage over fear. Ultimately, his message was a love of life, a love of people, reminding us of our own humanity, by remembering to laugh at himself.
Break number 7. Lennox Lewis. Retire.
The final break, allegedly, takes us to the last undisputed lineal heavyweight champion, Lennox Lewis. So let's take it from there.
You were a junior champion at age 18, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. How did you find it when age 18 you're a champion in boxing, and it is a lot to take?
Yeah, it is. I mean, you know, at that time there were many different countries leading the way, such as Cuba. Cuba had a strong team, East Germans had a strong team, Russians had a strong team, and Americans had a very strong team as well. And it was a big landscape of different countries, but they were great fighters. And, you know, I was coming from England, Canada at the time, and, you know, they didn't really rate me too much. And they said, oh, British fighters are all horizontal. And I said, what does that mean? That means that they all lay down. So I wanted to change that.
1998.
Following the trail, Lennox Lewis won the lineal status officially by defeating Shannon Briggs on March 28, 1998.
SinBstyle.com. 1999.
And Lennox Lewis became the undisputed lineal champion on November 13, 1999. He defeated Evander Holyfield in a rematch after a controversial draw earlier in the year to unify his WBC belt with Holyfield's WBA and IBF belt.
3 in favor of the winner and the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, Lennox Lewis.
Say it and believe it. Britain has an undisputed world heavyweight champion for the first time this century.
But what about the WBO belt, which in present time is needed to become undisputed? For starters, the World Boxing Organization formed in the late 80s after breaking away from the WBA over which rules should be applied.
The Klitschko brothers take the sweet science of boxing very seriously.
Give me a scouting report on your brother, Wladimir. What are his strengths as a boxer?
I don't like compliments to give to my brother. Come on, do it. You can do it right now. If you hear everyday compliments, you think, I am so strong. I am so powerful. I am Superman. I don't need to work really hard for that. And he lose the next fight.
The Klitschko brothers grew up, Vitali is 5 years older than Wladimir, in Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. Their father was a colonel in the old Soviet Air Force. They were children of the Cold War, raised by a Cold Warrior.
Are we likely or unlikely to see sometime a bout between the two of you, that you fight one another?
We don't want to see our mother crying, and we don't want to break our mother's heart. And we promised our mother, when we start a box, we will never fight against each other.
A mother's love is one thing, but money, big money, is another thing. Is that likely to change?
Money is a very important point in the life. It's not everything. It will never happen.
Never.
It will never happen.
At the time when Lennox Lewis became undisputed, the WBO belt was held by Vitali Klitschko, older brother of Wladimir Klitschko. This happened because it wasn't until February 2007 that all 3 main sanctioning bodies officially recognized the WBO. To be undisputed after 2007, you would need the WBC, WBA, IBF, and WBO. In his title defense, Vitali Klitschko retained the WBO by beating Ed Mahone by knockout on October 9th. And then beating Obed Sullivan on December 11th of 1999 when he was unable to continue going into the 10th round.
SinBstyle.com 2000.
So Lennox Lewis was the lineal undisputed champion with the WBC, WBA, and IBF belts. And Vitali Klitschko was the WBO champ. However, this would be short-lived. After becoming undisputed, Lennox Lewis was approved and scheduled to fight Michael Grant, but was stripped of the WBA title for not fighting the higher-ranked John Ruiz. Don King, who promoted Evander Holyfield and John Ruiz, had a clause in the rematch contract between Lennox Lewis and Evander Holyfield. The winner of the undisputed fight was to face the WBA's #1 contender. The #1 contender at the time was Henry Akinwande, but due to health issues, John Ruiz was moved up to #1. The WBA gave Lewis permission under these circumstances to fight Michael Grant, who was a WBC and IBF #2 ranked contender, as long as he agreed to fight Ruiz in the following match. Lewis agreed, but Don King challenged the WBA's decision.
SinBstyle.com.
Lennox Lewis was stripped of the WBA title after losing the battle in court. The WBA became vacant, and the #1 and #2 were set to fight for the title. This is how the Super Belt was created, to give unified champions of other belts more time to defend their titles, as well as the challengers the chance to fight for the title. If a fighter wins all of the titles but is stripped by one organization of his title, it's considered a disputed, undisputed champion. But in the meantime, Chris Byrd beat Vitali Klitschko on April 1st, 2000 to claim the WBO title. Vitali was up on all judges' scorecards, but was unable to continue into the 10th round after suffering a torn rotator cuff. Later in the year, Wladimir Klitschko avenged the loss of his brother by beating Chris Byrd by unanimous decision on October 14, 2000 to obtain the WBO belt. Evander Holyfield would regain the vacant WBA belt by beating John Ruiz by unanimous decision on August 12, 2000. And Lennox Lewis would defend the WBC and IBF 3 times in 2000 by knocking out Michael Grant in the second round on April 29th. Frans Botha by second round knockout on July 15th. And by unanimous decision versus David Tua on November 11, 2000. In a stunning upset in South Africa, Hasim Rahman defeated Lennox Lewis by knockout in the 5th round on April 22, 2001 to briefly capture the WBC and IBF titles. He would also have claim to the Lineal following the given list. This would lead to a much anticipated rematch.
Bring your sister, bring anyone. Look, hold. I'm gonna tell you right now, if you don't want me saying nothing about your mother, your father, or anybody else in your family, do not say nothing about my family. Be careful what you say. Do not say nothing about my family. Be careful what you say to me. Do not say nothing. Man, you ain't nobody. I say what I want to say to you. Go ahead, man. I say what I want to say to you. What you mean? I just said it. What you want me to say? What you want me to say? Say anything like what? Like what? You want. Like what? Anything what you want me to say? Say anything you want. What? Fellas. Okay, we don't want that. Guys, Come on, big man.
Lewis would get his revenge 7 months later by knocking Hasim Rahman out in the 4th round on November 17, 2001 to regain the WBC and IBF World Heavyweight titles. This would also make him a 2-time Lineal holder. And John Ruiz?
And the new heavyweight champion of the world
would gain the WBA from Evander Holyfield by unanimous decision on March 3, 2001. And retain the belt by split decision draw to Evander Holyfield again, concluding their trilogy on December 15, 2001. Wladimir Klitschko would hang on to the WBO by beating Derrick Jefferson by 2nd round knockout on March 24, 2001. and by beating Charles Shufford by 6-round knockout on August 4th, 2001.
He is the WBC, the IBF, and the IBO heavyweight champion of the world, Lennox Lewis.
In a long overdue fight, Lennox Lewis defended the WBC and IBF titles, beating Mike Tyson by 8th-round knockout on June 8, 2002. This would be the last time Lennox Lewis defended the IBF title, after vacating it later on in the year. Lewis vacated the IBF title after refusing to negotiate terms with mandatory challenger Byrd, and by being given $1 million in a Range Rover by promoter Don King to do so, because King wished to promote a fight between Byrd and Evander Holyfield for the vacant title. Byrd would later gain the IBF title by beating Evander Holyfield by unanimous decision on December 12, 2002.
All three in favor of the winner of the IBF Heavyweight Championship of the World, Byrd.
John Ruiz would defend the WBA after Kirk Johnson was disqualified in the 10th round on July 27, 2002.
That's a disqualification, and Ruiz is going to be the winner in the fight.
And Wladimir Klitschko would defend the WBO in 2002 by beating Frans Botha by 8th-round knockout on March 16th. By beating Ray Mercer by 6th-round stoppage on June 29th.
I think I can prove my talent with the fight against Lewis, Holyfield, or Tyson. But Lennox Lewis right now is the top one. That's why I wish to first Lewis.
All right, you've said you want to fight Lewis sooner than later. Do you think this performance will convince everyone, including your own promoter, that you should try to fight Lewis next?
From my side, I am ready for fight. And from side promoter, you know how it is all the time going. So I'm ready.
And after Jameel McCline barely made it to the end of the round 10, the fight was stopped by way of TKO on December 7th, 2002.
If, in fact, Wladimir is to get a chance against Lennox Lewis, the apparent business plan would be Lewis fights older brother Vitali Klitschko in the spring, then a possible rematch against Mike Tyson if Tyson can win a fight or two to get himself into that position, and then perhaps the big summit match between Lewis and Wladimir Klitschko early in 2004.
Tell me, it's over. It's over. The fight's over.
All right, talking of the future, you've talked about how you wanted to fight Lennox Lewis. But if your brother beats Lennox Lewis, you most likely will never get to fight Lennox Lewis.
Then, if Vitali will beat Lennox Lewis, we will get our dream, and our dream will be true. I mean, we want to be in the same time champions in the different versions, and it was never before in the boxing history that two brothers in the heavyweight champions in the same time.
Thank you very much, Wladimir. Congratulations again.
Thank you very much.
Jim?
2003.
SinBStyle.com. On March 1st, 2003, the undisputed light heavyweight champion, Roy Jones Jr., moved up to defeat John Ruiz to gain the WBA heavyweight world title.
The new WBA heavyweight champion of the world, Roy Jones Jr.
This leads us to our feature fight, Corrie Sanders versus Wladimir Klitschko for the WBO heavyweight title.
Of course, the next best thing, Jim, sometimes becomes the last big bust.
Older brother Vitali is ranked as the #1 contender at the moment by both the WBA and the WBC, but Corrie Sanders doesn't have to worry about him tonight. He's worrying about Wladimir, who is not highly ranked by the other governing bodies, partially because he holds a marginalized title belt.
They tell us that when Wladimir Klitschko fights, an astonishing number of women watch on television. Wladimir Klitschko seems so perfect, you wonder what's wrong with him. Can Corrie Sanders find out?
SinBStyle.com. Klitschko came out the aggressor and looked to work behind his jab, but he quickly got a taste of Sanders' stiff right jab. The high activity rate could have won Klitschko the round had he fought discipline, but instead he got into a brawl, which quickly favored the punching power of Sanders. SinBStyle.com. After a few well-placed and well-timed hooks, Sanders dropped Klitschko with 35 seconds left in round 1. And as soon as Klitschko was up, another flurry of punches put him right back down.
Wladimir down a second time.
And the next big thing is about to become the last big bust.
Sanders gave him no time to breathe, but it was the bell that would come to Vladimir's rescue.
So Wladimir Klitschko is down twice in the opening round against Corrie Sanders, and all of Germany holds its breath.
Round 2.
Sanders continued his pressure into the second round, quickly knocking Klitschko down for the third time. The left hand of Sanders couldn't miss, and after sustaining another barrage of punches, Klitschko went down for the fourth time, and the fight was stopped.
Point out that it isn't just HBO, which had been enthusiastic about Vladimir Klitschko. He's been #1 in the Ring magazine rankings, unaffected by politics, for more than a year. So there are many who had anointed him as the
how affected everybody is with politics. You'll be surprised.
SinBStyle.com. You're the one who pointed out that what a great heavyweight needs is not only the ability to punch, but to take a punch. Yes. And he did not take that punch.
I like the fight. He was on his way up when the ref called the fire out. I like that. You keep getting up. That's a man. He's got a future in this sport, and he's not done.
This is unexpected also at this time. Do you have any plans now to either fight Vitali Klitschko, who challenged you twice in the ring? What was that?
No, I don't know. In my opinion, I think he's a bad sportsman, to be honest. You know, you win some, you lose some, and he came to me and I'll take back and I'll get you back and all that because I beat his brother. So, you know, well, bad luck for him. He had the title and I'm not looking at him.
Your brother Vitali was so upset after the fight that he challenged Corrie Sanders. So who's going to get to fight him first, you or your brother?
No, it was nothing bad between Corrie Sanders and Vitali. Vitali just said that he will return back the belt to the family, and that's it. Of course, Vitali is right now contender #1 in WBC, and I hope he will fight against Lennox Lewis. And with Corrie Sanders, I will take a rematch.
I know you're being philosophical, but how disappointed are you?
I'm really disappointed on my person right now, but I know that I just have to learn. Long life, and you have always learn.
With Wladimir in his corner, Vitali would get his chance at the WBC title against 37-year-old Lennox Lewis.
SinBStyle.com. Been at the top for a decade. Only Muhammad Ali, Joe Louis and Larry Holmes have had 4 title fights than this man.
Long promotion is proud to present 12 rounds of boxing for the linear, legitimate, and universally recognized undisputed heavyweight championship of the world.
This was a drama-filled fight, with each landing some big shots. It was certainly competitive and action-packed, and in my opinion went back and forth. Early in the 3rd round, Vitali was cut on the top of his left eyelid that gave him issues throughout the round.
SinBStyle.com.
But he would continue fighting on through the match. Even worse for Vitali, he was cut on his cheek during the 5th round. Lewis landed a monster uppercut that Vitali somehow took pretty well. But again, even with the terrible cuts on the left side of his face, this was a very competitive fight. And after 6 competitive rounds of boxing, unfortunately for Vitali, the fight would be stopped.
ZenBStyle.com.
Klitschko knows he was retired. Absolute mayhem here. Arguments going on. Lewis has been declared the winner by the
ZenBStyle.com.
I want rematch. When doctor stop the fight, I won't fight again. I show for everybody I can beat Lewis.
Will you give him a rematch?
You know, if it calls for, if the money's right, yeah, definitely.
The corner people did a very good job in controlling the bleeding throughout the fight. The problem was not the blood. Usually 95, 99% of the time is because a cut is bleeding into the eye and the boxer is unable to see. In this particular case, the lid was detached to a point that he needed to tilt his head to be able to see, therefore wouldn't be able to see, pick up a punch that would come such like a hook. So there was no other option in that case. Even though he may have felt okay, even though he may feel as though that he could have adapted to the situation, he wouldn't have cleared under any criteria to be able to continue.
ZenBStyle.com.
Chris Byrd would retain the IBF belt by beating Frans by unanimous decision.
All three in favor of the winner and still champion,
Chris Byrd. 2004.
But it was always Vitali who led the way.
You obviously love your brother. You respect your brother. But do you sometimes, just sometimes, get tired of being the younger brother?
I used to. It's my question. I used to think about it, but I can't change it. You know. I mean, in the whole life, I will be younger brother.
Younger brother, Wladimir.
Although they had other options, the brothers decided that boxing offered the best opportunity for fame and fortune. It was, they felt, an ancient and honorable sport.
The rules in boxing doesn't change for a very long time, for 1,000 years, still the same actually.
The two gentlemen soon realized that if you really want to succeed at boxing, you have to do it in the United States. So they moved to Los Angeles and began the long run towards the top of the boxing world. The older, Vitali, has won 32 fights, all but one with knockouts, and lost only 2. Wladimir has 42 wins. The hard work goes on under the watchful eye of Emanuel Stewart, who has trained many champions.
Tell me how good you think they are or they can be.
They could possibly become all-time greats.
Vladimir's the more coordinated.
Wladimir Klitschko is the more coordinated of the two, but the older brother, Vitali, is more intense and actually has more of a meaner streak in him.
The Klitschkos are also under pressure from a boxing world desperate for new stars.
You're watching HBO.
The giants from behind the Iron Curtain have become the great red hopes of boxing.
They're both professional fighters, you know.
We wanted to know why the boxing establishment has such a big investment in the Klitschkos. So we met boxing commentator Max Kellerman at a popular boxing hangout near Times Square in New York for an assessment.
Neither one is perfect. Neither one jumps out at me as being dominant, great fighters. But they're both good, and they're both really big. And it'd be a tall order for anyone to beat either guy.
So after a surprising 2003, this was the latest annual Ring Magazine rankings for 2004. Chris Byrd retained the IBF belt by a draw with Andrew Galata on April 17, 2004.
Split, it is a draw. The fight
draw, and I honestly can't say I'm surprised.
And by beating Jameel McCline by split decision on November 13th, 2004.
The winner by split decision and still IBF heavyweight champion of the world, Byrd.
SinBstyle.com.
Corrie Sanders vacated the WBO to become the number 2 ranked heavyweight challenger for the vacant WBC belt versus the number 1 contender, Vitali Klitschko. This allowed the number 2 ranked Layman Brewster to beat the number 1 ranked Wladimir Klitschko in another shocking upset by TKO in the 5th round on April 10, 2004 for the vacant title left by Sanders. Brewster would successfully defend the WBO by beating Kylie Meehan by split decision later that year on September 4th, 2004. As far as the WBA, John Ruiz beat Hasim Rahman by unanimous decision on December 13th to gain the WBA interim title.
SinBstyle.com.
All for the winner by unanimous decision, John, the Quiet Man,
Ruiz was upgraded to the WBA heavyweight champion after Roy Jones Jr. vacated the title on February 20th, 2004, choosing to fight Antonio Tarver rather than Ruiz.
SinBstyle.com.
Roy Jones's promoter stated a fight with Holyfield and Tyson fell through. Lennox wasn't fighting, and there was no point in fighting Corrie Sanders, who didn't have a title and would be for less money than he would make versus Ruiz. Ruiz would later beat Akinwande by TKO in the 11th round on April 17th when the ref stopped the fight.
SinBstyle.com.
And Andrew Galata by unanimous decision on November 13th, 2004. On February 6, 2004, Lennox Lewis retired as WBC champion.
SinBstyle.com.
Choosing not to rematch Vitali Klitschko ahead of the WBC mandated March 1st deadline to accept the bout, causing the 7th break in the lineal history. And for the vacant WBC belt, Vitali Klitschko would defeat Corrie Sanders by TKO in the 8th round on April 24th, 2004. Vitali was able to box and move well from the outside and not exchange on the inside when he was stunned. Sanders had his moments, but he was dominated for the most part. I don't think his stamina was up to par either, but still, I enjoyed the fight and I do believe Sanders' power was real.
SinBstyle.com.
Vitali would go on to defend the WBC belt against Danny Williams by 8th round TKO on December 11, 2004.
How many titles did you hold when you gave up? How many have you held in your career?
Well, I've been undisputed champion, and I held the WBC belt for quite a while.
Yeah. Now, Lua, how many different boxing leagues are there? There's WBC, there's WBF, and WBI, is that right?
WBO, WBF.
It's kind of confusing.
Alphabet.
Okay. Why are there so many?
I don't know, but I hold the most prestigious one.
Yeah, which is the one that Ali used to have.
Ali and Sonny Liston.
Yeah. So he's the kind of the biggest and the best.
Yeah.
You're retired, okay? We've established this.
Yes.
They must be offering you money to get back. I mean,
plenty of money.
People would want to see you back in the ring.
Yeah.
It's not that long ago you were boxing, and the last guy you beat, that guy, he was what was his name? Klitschko or something?
Yeah, Klitschko.
Whatever his name was.
Yeah.
Presumably they'd like a rematch with him because
they would love
he beat you before, didn't he?
I've already accomplished all my goals. I've done what I needed to do. He needs me more than I need him.
That's true.
Because right now he doesn't have anybody to box, and he's not getting that respect. He feels that he could just come in and be an instant star, but you have to work at it. You have to have a couple years that the public can see you and say, hey, I like this guy, and let's see how he's going to do it against the next opponent.
We've covered the first 7 lineal breaks and reviewed the historical context of its development throughout the years. Most of the interruptions occurred due to retirement and one due to suspension. Understanding boxing history and politics, we can then examine the truth about Tyson Fury and how it relates to his ever-clinging notion of being the best due to his lineal status. In the upcoming episodes, we'll follow the championship belts movement after Lewis retired and take a deeper look into how the new lineal champ was established. In the meantime, now ask yourself, does your lineal champ duck multiple rematches, fail multiple drug tests, have his boxing license suspended, vacate his titles to avoid being stripped, and retire? It's fine for people to have a fresh start and move on from their destructive path, but let's not live off those accomplishments if you've never owned the role. If your new claim to fame is surviving, it's only a matter of time before you're caught. See you soon.